Charitra chapter 16. Namadaraka said, Sir, the more I listen to your account of Sri Guru's divine acts, the more I long to hear further. The zeal of Siddha was whetted by the former's noble earnings, and he went on. Son, at Mahurapura there lived a wealthy Brahmin named Gopinath. However much he could live in luxury and comfort, he was as depressed as though he had no cause for happiness, for he was not blessed with children at all. In fact, several children were born to him, but some of them died soon after their birth, while the rest expired after living for a few days. With a keen desire for offsprings, they took to the worship of Lord Dattatreya. After some time, he was blessed with a son who survived. In gratitude to the Lord, they named him Datta. Under the lavish affection of parents, the child grew up to be a handsome boy endowed with all noble qualities. He was distinguished for his cultured mind and his peaceful demeanor. In the joy of bringing up the sweet boy, the parents forgot all the former griefs. The boy soon grew up like the moon in the brighter half of the month. When Datta attained the age of 8, his parents performed a sacred thread ceremony at an auspicious hour and put him on the course of Vedic studies. After he attained the age of 16, he was married to a girl named Savitri, who was well matched to him in beauty and noble qualities. Like the mythical divine pair, Rati and Manmata, they were bound to each other with the strangest ties of mutual love and devotion. They were a passionate pair like the pair of mythical Chakravaka birds and were unable to bear the briefest separation from each other. They trod the path of righteousness, being prompted by the utmost care for each other's welfare. Such was a zeal in the service of a beloved that any number of hours of the hardest work not did not tire Savitri in the least. She could not bear to be separated from him even for a short while. In his absence, such comforts, luxuries, and things of beauty like the flowers, the silvery light of the full moon, ornaments, and even delicious food proved unbearable to her, as she could not share them with him. Flower garlands were like thorns to her, and delicious food was like poison. As though the wicked goddess Fortune could not bear the sight of their perfect love and harmony for so long, young Datta was afflicted with tuberculosis. His parents were very anxious about his deteriorating health and tried all kinds of medical treatment they could provide. But to their utter disappointment, nothing seemed to help. Finally, all medical men declared that his ailment was incurable. As days and months passed, young Datta was getting pale and emaciated, even like the moon waning towards the approach of the new moon day. All the time he was very much troubled by incessant shortness of breath, cough, and phlegm. In addition to the disease, the young man was very much worried about the happiness and health of his young wife and a bleak future if he were to die. This worry further beclouded his vitality, and soon he was reduced to a bundle of bones and with hardly any flesh. Young Savitri too was very much worried about his condition and lost all her appetite and sleep. She could not bear to eat or sleep more than her beloved did, and soon she too was reduced physically and mentally into a mere shadow of her husband. The fetid smell that emanated from poor Datta was unable even for the physicians who treated him. Unbearable. No one except his wife could bear to be by his bedside or attend upon him in any other manner. All the time she was immersed heart and soul in keeping him as clean and comfortable as possible by applying the finest scent to his foul-smelling body, massaging his aching limbs and administering medicines at the appointment hours. Besides, she arranged for special prayers and worship for his recovery. With the help of learned priests, she even gave away valuable gifts to the pious and the poor for the love of God. But in spite of all this, the terrible disease did not abate even by a hair's breadth. Only the zeal of Savitri in the observance of the vow of Pativratya was growing more and more intense as days passed. Everyone who came to see and console the unfortunate couple and the aged parents of Datta said that jealous fortune was working havoc with their life of happiness and love. Unable to bear the sight of the happy countenance of young Savitri in the prime of her youth, wicked fortune, they said, has chosen to eclipse her radiant moon-like face. Gopinath and his wife, in the forenoon of their life, could not bear the sight of the sinking sun, and what was worse, the plight of their young daughter in law. Having despaired of his recovery and even of his survival, they felt it cruel to permit the young housewife to submit herself to such a terrible ordeal as serving such a sick husband. They warned her to keep away from him and to protect herself from the pestilent and pernicious infection, but she could not relent. She would not relent. Her young husband's health being so helplessly consumed by the raging disease, she felt she had nothing else to safeguard and protect, not even her health, beauty, or life. At last, one day, young Datta said to his parents, choking with sorrow, "This fell disease that consumes me must be the result of my wicked deeds in former life. As such, I shall bear it stoically with fortitude and patience and accept the proper culmination. Henceforth, you need not worry on my account in the least." Turning to his young wife, he said, "In a previous life, I must have been your sworn enemy, wreaking my vengeance in this fashion. It is time you accept the truth and forsake me. Go home to your own parents and try to live as happily as you can and forget all about me." The tender heart of the young housewife broke out in unrestrained sorrow, and she said amidst tears in choking voice, "You are the Lord of my life, master of my destiny, and the only joy of my life. I have none besides you to live for. For a true wife, her husband is everything, but not her parents. I can no longer live as a separate individual. The moment I leave your company, the spark of life will no longer hold my soul and body together. My deserting you will thus amount to my committing suicide, which is said to be the most unpardonable of the sins from which I shall never be saved. There still haunts in the innermost recesses of my being the hope that divine mercy is all powerful and can work the seemingly impossible miracle of saving your life for my sake. I firmly believe that the more I heartily exert myself in your service and consume the brightness of my countenance in loving watchfulness in your attendance, the brighter the vital spark in you will grow. I believe that if God blesses a soul which is drowning in the ocean of misery, it shall in a trice be transported to the very pinnacle of joy and health. Such a merciful Lord is indeed our only refuge, and He is all powerful. With a stern resolve, she then humbly bowed and touched the feet of Datta's parents in reverence and said, "I learnt that at Gandharvapura lives a saint, a very holy and powerful sannyasi named Sri Narsimha Saraswati. Something tells me that from within that with his blessings and grace, my beloved will once again be restored to the former health and strength. If you accord your kind permission, I shall take my husband there." Gopinath and his wife too discovered a new strength and hope in her words and said, If you have such unflinching faith, do take him there at the earliest possible. May the Lord bless you." The young couple once more bowed to them, received their blessings, and were at once started on their final enterprise. The noble lady Savitri took all possible care to conduct her husband comfortably to Gandharvapura. She arranged a soft cushioned palanquin for him and instructed the bearers to walk slowly and steadily so as not to jolt a hailing lord. She lovingly held him against soft pillows and walked beside the palanquin. After trekking like this for several days across hills and forests, the party reached the neighborhood of their holy destination, but to her utter disappointment, she found that her husband was dead. Her only hope being thus thwarted and only basis of her existence knocked out, she found nothing to live for. With the flames of suppressed grief raging in her heart like a volcano, she took the final resolve to end her own life too. The natives of that place, who were helpless witnesses of her dire misfortune, had somehow managed to dissuade her from such a precipitate act of despair. She was shocked to the very core of her being and did not know what else she should do next. Such a forlorn existence seemed utterly meaningless and unbearable for her. Soon the imprisoned grief burst out thus in loud wailing. "My dear, why have you deserted me like this? Whither have you left? If you do not return to this body and give us cheer and comfort, neither your father, mother, nor I, your dear wife, can survive, and you will incur the sin of killing us all. Is it not said in the Shastras that if you have no sons, your sacred debt to your ancestors would go undischarged? Besides, you have not even instructed me as to whether I would spend the remaining days of my widowed life. What is more, how can I see your parents with my widowed countenance? Then, now that I am a widow, people thenceforth consider the very sight of my face an ill omen. Alas, my plight is like that of a creature which has come to the river to slake his thirst, but which is instead devoured by a cruel crocodile on its very bank, or like a weary traveler who was crushed to death by the sudden fall of a tree underneath which he sought to repose, or like a cow that, having become to graze, was killed by a tiger, or like a devotee who was crushed to death by the fall of the shrine to which he came to seek divine protection. I have come for the darshan of Sri Guru and to seek his protection for my ailing husband, but I lost my husband even as I approached the place. Oh, Sri Guru, fearing that you will be restrained to grant health for my ailing husband, have you chosen to rob him of my life spark even sooner? If you mean that it is not in your power to ward off my husband's fell disease, to whom else shall we turn for protection? Have you achieved any greatness or glory by such a deed as this? Now I shall carry the news of this great achievement of yours to the other worlds. O Mother Goddess Gauri, have you chosen to forget all the woes which I assiduously observed all through my life in your honor? What has happened to your power and mercy that can annihilate the misfortune of widowhood? Also, all the suspicious signs of a housewife have been heartlessly robbed from me by death. As the ship of my life danced blissfully on the bosom of the ocean of life, the terrible whale called death has gulped the very bark of my holiness as a housewife. Wailing thus, she again and again recalled every word and gesture of her late dear husband and sank ever deeper in grief and fell on his cold dead body in boundless fondness. As Savitri thus was lost in the depths of grief, an ascetic, wearing rudrakshas and vibhuti and holding a trident in his hand with long matted hair, approached her from among the crowd and addressed her thus: My daughter, why do you wail so sorely? Quiet yourself. Don't you know that the death will never return despite all your grief and wailing? After all, death is natural to all creatures, and our other worldly relations are only tentative and transient. It is like two birds coming together on a tree for a night's rest, and the next morning each of them goes their own way. Again, it is like two logs of wood drifting together down a stream. The next moment, a stray wave parts them again. So two souls come together in this life just by an accidental coincidence of circumstances. Such indeed is the relationship of a wife and a husband too. Else, if there be any abiding relationship between the two, you should be able to say whose wife you were in your previous life. If you reflect deeply, you will realize that no one in this world is essentially related to any other in any manner whatsoever. For the spirit within us, which is our essential self, is all pervading beyond birth and death, and when it is associated with the physical structure made of the five material elements, it loses sight and its true nature and wrongly identifies itself as an individual and claims someone as its husband and some other as its father, and so on. When you consider deeply, you will at once realize that all such feelings and emotions are merely our mental creation projected by our basic ignorance. In itself, the individual soul is without form. When it is associated with the three modes of nature, sattva, rajas, and tamas, the soul is individualized. It falsely identifies itself with the material structure which it enlivens, and thus gets caught in the web of joys and sorrows. But when you consider these with discrimination, it will be clear to you that the birth of the body is not the birth of the soul, nor does the death of the body constitute the death of the soul. When an individual is endowed with a perfected intellect, he will be able to penetrate beneath the web of illusion, thereby break it asunder. Such a one will no longer be subject to any kind of sorrow. One may mistake a flower garland for a snake in semi-darkness, but once a light is fetched to examine it, the illusion ceases and the true nature of the garland is revealed. Similarly, till one attains true wisdom, the phenomenon of birth and death seems real, and in its turn, the soul seems to be subject to the pairs of life experiences like joy and sorrow. Therefore, one must pull together together one's own intellectual strength of steadfast understanding and thus cross the delusion of sorrow and suffering once and forever. Such a crisis in life as this is the most opportune occasion for it. If by our inadvertence we let slip the priceless opportunity, namely this human birth, it is hardly possible to get such another again. Grief-stricken Savitri passively listened to his discourse, and when he concluded, she put forth her own argument. I have set out on the long trek to this place, leaving all my kith and kin at home in great hope of my husband's recovery. But even on the way, he breathed his last. Now I am utterly helpless, and you are my only guide. Show me a way out of my dire calamity. The compassionate sadhu replied, a devoted wife need no complex form of sadhana or spiritual discipline to attain the true object of life. Wisdom of the self, loving service of and devotion of her husband is in itself the supreme path for her. Sage Brihaspati has taught us thus, the whole of the phenomenal existence will come under the control of a pativrata, the lady who ever attends on her husband with a shadow and like a shadow and serves him with all her love and looks upon such loving service of self-dedication as her spiritual oath. She who is in loving reverence spontaneously partakes of the washings of her husband's feet as the holy water of Ganga and cannot relish any food other than her husband's leftover as consecrated food. She who receives his orders as the holy writ, such a one never loses her composure whenever he gets angry, but on the other hand calms him down with all the love she can command. Such a one is Pativrata. There is nothing she cannot accomplish in this world. Such a one never fritters her precious time in light and frivolous courtesy calls on her neighbors and acquaintance. She never communicates anything to her own kith and kin without the knowledge of her husband. Even if he happens to be weak, poor, or even given to immoral ways, such a Pativrata never wavers in her faith that he is the embodiment of the divine, but serves him accordingly. The customary and auspicious accessories of a housewife will, like turmeric and kumkum, are to her the most precious and dear ornaments, for they are said to be most conducive to her husband's well-being. She knows no comfort of her own besides his happiness and comfort. On the other hand, a woman who opposes and contradicts her husband will be born in her next life as a bitch. A housewife who abuses him will be born as a owl. She who cares to appease her palate and with delicious food of her own liking and is mindful of her husband's taste will be born as a pig. The wife who speaks angrily and harshly to her husband will be born dumb in her next birth. She who threatens and warns her husband will be reborn as a tigress. An adulterous and unfaithful wife will be reborn as a worm or insect. My daughter, Shastras lay down that the ideal duty of a housewife on the death of her husband is sahagamana, putting an end to her own physical existence through self-immolation on the funeral pyre of her husband, or as an alternative, she may live on strictly observing the oaths of widowhood. It consists of shaving off her hair, sleeping on bare earth, taking food only during the day, and abstaining from the use of such luxuries as the betel and nut and the use of materials enjoined by the Shastras for a housewife. She must wear only a white garment at all times. During the holy months of Kartika, Magha and Visakha, taking the special holy bath every day and observing the vow of Chandrayana, she must spend the rest of her life in listening to devotional accounts of the divine act of the Lord. She must scrupulously protect her chastity and her natural charm from the notice of others. I have just recounted to you only the regulations that were laid down by sage Brihaspati. You may choose Sahagamana if you like, for thereby you will be able to save your husband from the kingdom of death, Yamaloka, and elevate him along with you to heaven. Even the gods will honor and obey the wish of such a great Pativrata. Savitri listened attentively and said, Revered sir, I am in the prime of my youth, and hence it is safer for me to perform Sahagamana. The sadhu was very much pleased and said, Pious one, you have well said. As you have come to a long way for the darshan of Sri Guru, first of all pay your respects to him. Then take the holy dip in the river, put on a clean garments, and then give away the materials they should be used by the housewife to pious couples as tokens of your heartfelt repentance for the sins of former life which have brought you now into such a plight. Take these rudrakshas and wear them round your neck. Take this holy ash and apply it to your body. Then besprinkle Besprinkle your late husband's body with the holy washings of Sri Guru's feet and then perform Sahagamana. So saying, he gave her some Rudraksha and holy ash and then went away. Then accordingly, Savitri gave away the said gifts to pious Brahmin couples and then said to her companions, "Go home. Henceforth, Parameshwara, Lord Shiva, and his consort goddess Parvati are my parents. I shall join them only. But don't divulge to the aged parents of my sad calamity, else they would at once die of the grief. Tell them that both of us are faring well here." And after sending them away, she picked up the fire for husband's funeral and she and her own Sahagamana and boldly walked at the head of the bearers of the dead body, with all her beauty of youth, steadfast religious devotion to her late husband, which informed her moral courage and zeal to commit Sahagamana. She looked like Parvati of yore, proceeding for her tapas to win the hand of Lord Shiva and eternal union of marriage. All the amazed spectators marvelled at her boldness and pativratya. They felt that she who had not fully enjoyed the bliss of wedded life and who is still in the bloom of her youth was surely blessed in that she is sure to uplift even her entire race in public esteem. They accordingly glorified her virtue. She arrived at the cremation ground, bowed before the sacred fire, and duly worshipped the housewives who had assembled there. Then she reflected deeply on the teachings of the sadhu and wore the rudraksha around her neck. She then besmirred her body with the holy ash given by the sadhu and took the blessing and permission of the Vedic Pandits, chanting verses in praise of Sri Guru. She then proceeded to the Sangama. All along the way, she mentally addressed Sri Guru thus: "O thou Supreme Spirit, you are the bestower of everything, the owner and the Lord of creation, the sole refuge of all pious souls, the ocean of mercy. You are manifest as the Holy Trinity. Hitherto, countless mortals like me have been getting all their wishes fulfilled just by an iota of thy grace. Now I too shall fulfill my object and take your fame even to the very heaven. Till now many dead people were raised, restored to health by the power of thy presence. Many that were caught up in terrible crisis could thus win freedom from fear. The poor and wretched were blessed with wealth, and the ignorant ones gained knowledge. In such a holy place as this today, I shall attain spiritual identity with you along with my husband through Sahagamana." Glorifying the Lord in this fashion, she quickly arrived at the Sangama and bowed to the divine feet of Sri Guru. Sri Guru greeted her with a smile and blessed her, saying, "May you be blessed with a long life of a housewife. May you give birth to 8 children who would become as famous as the Ashtavasus." The assembly of devotees who waited on him were all amazed at the impossible blessing and compassionately informed him of the young lady's plight. Sri Guru said in stern voice, "My word shall never go in vain. Fetch the dead body here." In the meanwhile, some Vedic Pandits arrived and worshipped the master, chanting the Rudra mantra. Soon after, the dead body was fetched and kept on the ground in front of him. Sri Guru cast a searching glance at it, muttered the Rudra mantra, and sprinkled holy water on it, and at once it was revived, and young Datta sat up awakened from deep sleep. Young Savitri was beside herself with love and wonder. Her eyes filled with tears of joy, she at once prostrated to Sri Guru, ran up to her dead husband, and recounted to him all that had happened. And Datta too was immensely happy, and he, along with his wife, heartily glorified the divinity of Sri Guru, and all the people who had gathered there loudly hailed the master. However, one among the crowd was jealous and cunning, and in his skepticism, he warily remarked, "Why glorify this sannyasi? God's decree that was subtly written on the brow of Datta is being realized at the proper time. He came back to life only as per the divine writ. How can this sannyasi be now credited with such a miracle?" Sri Guru turned to the man and said, "In fact, the Creator had ordained only 30 years as the span of Datta's life in the present birth. He shall live 100 years in his next birth. Now I have exchanged the one for the other, and so that Datta can live for 100 years in this life and only for 30 years in the next one." So saying, by this mere look, he granted the mystical knowledge of the threefold times threefold time to the skeptic and enabled him to see for himself that original divine writ of the Creator. When the man was convinced, all the people around once again hailed Sri Guru. The latter turned to the happy young couple, blessed them, saying, "May you live long together with wealth and universal fame." Pleased with the blessing, the young pair took their holy bath at a Sangama and duly worshipped the Master. Just then the sun set, the Master attended to his twilight prayers and returned to his mat with the devotees. Digambara, Digambara, Sripada Vallabha Digambara, 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 Vaduta Chintana Digambara. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha.